Welcome back.
It's good to be here.
I want you to just, for a second, picture the desk in front of us, because usually when we get ready for one of these, we have a couple articles, maybe a report, a PDF or two,
Manageable stack.
a manageable stack. Today, we have a bit of a problem.
Heavy problem. A very heavy problem.
That figurative thud you just heard, that's the sound of the final week of January 2026 landing. It's just this mountain of executive orders, proclamations, agency press releases, economic white papers. Frankly, it's overwhelming.
It has been a breathless week in Washington. And I think breathless is exactly the right word because the sheer velocity of governance, it just feels like it's shifted into a different gear.
It really does. And that's exactly why we're doing this today. I mean, if you've been scrolling the news, you've probably seen the headlines.
Oh, sure.
Wildfires in LA, tax cuts, maybe something that seems totally random, like an IndyCar race in DC.
Right. Little flashes of information.
Exactly. But those headlines, they're all distinct, separate dots. And our job today, I guess our mission, is to try and connect those dots.
Right. Because when you actually sit down and read the fine print, and that is what we have spent the last 48 hours doing, just reading, you realize these are not random policies at all. They're gears in a very specific, very synchronized machine.
We're not just looking at the what today.
Right.
We're really trying to dig into the how. And the how, it seems to be this incredibly aggressive use of the executive branch to pull levers that, historically presidents just haven't touched or haven't touched this directly.
I think that's a key point. We are seeing the mechanics of a fully unleashed executive. So we're talking about orders that don't just suggest policy or create task forces. They are actively and in writing overriding state and local laws.
This whole new landscape.
It is.
Yeah.
We're seeing a redefinition of fundamental things like how we pay taxes, how our kids go to school, how we as a society treat addiction, and even how we navigate the entire geopolitical map.
So here is the roadmap for you listening. We are going to try to parse out intent versus effect. The White House, they release these documents with these fantastic sounding titles. Who doesn't want recovery or freedom or safety?
Their focus group to perfection.
Of course. But we need to look at who actually benefits when the ink is dry. When the pen hits the paper, whose life gets easier.
And, just as importantly, whose life gets harder. Who gets left behind in that equation?
Precisely. Is this the decisive action that everyone talks about, the kind that fixes a broken system? Or is this something else? Is it political theater that ends up eroding some fundamental constitutional boundaries?
We have a lot of ground to cover. From the ashes of California all the way to the streets of Havana. So let's start on the West Coast.
Let's do it. Section 1. The battle for California.
This is the story that's been dominating the news cycle, and for good reason. We are looking at an executive order titled, and I really want to get this wording exact because it matters, addressing state and local failures to rebuild Los Angeles. That title alone is a shot across the bow. It's not neutral.
It is so personal. Usually these documents are incredibly dry. Federal assistance for disaster areas, something like that. This one is addressing failures. To set the context for everyone listening, we're a full year out from the Pacific Palisades and Eaton Canyon wildfires.
Right. January of 2025, this was a massive event. Nearly 40,000 acres burned, thousands of structures, homes, businesses, just gone. It was an absolute catastrophe.
And according to the fact sheet that the White House released alongside this order, their rebuilding statistics are, they look like a typo. It says that 1 year later, fewer than 10 homes have been rebuilt. 10.
10. Out of thousands lost. If that number holds up to scrutiny, and we have to assume it's the number the administration is operating on, it represents a complete and total systemic paralysis.
It's staggering.
It is. You have thousands of families who are essentially homeless or living in temporary lodging motels with relatives for a full year, while the local permitting office just churns and churns.
And the White House isn't blaming the fire. They are not blaming the complexity of the situation. They are pointing the finger directly at the local government. The text of the order, it actually specifically names Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass.
Which is just, it's extraordinary.
It points out that she was, and I'm quoting here, traveling abroad during the crisis.
I have read, thousands of executive orders in my career. You almost never see a president name check a specific local mayor in a formal legal document like this. It signals that this isn't just about housing policy. This is about political warfare. It is framing the local democratic leadership as morally and functionally incompetent.
Okay, so the narrative is set. California is broken. The feds are here to fix it. But how? How do they actually do that? Because Traditionally, things like zoning, building permits, inspections, that is the holy grail of local control. That's city council stuff, county supervisor stuff.
And this is where we get into the sort of the legal heavyweight mechanism of this document. It's a concept that's going to come up again and again today. It's called preemption.
Preemption. Okay, break that down for us.
So, in constitutional law, under the Supremacy Clause, federal law is the supreme law of the land. Preemption is the legal principle that allows a federal law to displace or just plain override a conflicting state or local law.
Right. And you usually see it with things like interstate commerce or immigration policy.
Exactly. Big national level issues. But here, they are applying that principle to local building permits.
That feels different.
It is very different. Specifically, you have to look at Section 3 of the order. It directs FEMA and the Small Business Administration, the two agencies handing out the money, to issue regulations that preempt state and local permitting obstacles that are impeding the flow of federal relief.
So translate that into plain English for the guy whose house burned down in the Palisades. What does that mean for him?
It means that if the city of Los Angeles requires, say, a 2-year environmental impact study for your specific plot of land, or if it requires a specific, very strict earthquake safety review that takes months, the federal government can now step in and say, that rule is blocking our federal relief money. Therefore, it is void. You can ignore it.
Wow. So that is massive. That is Washington, D.C. effectively dissolving the L.A. City Council's authority because they think they're moving too slowly.
It's a seismic shift in the balance of federalism. But they don't just scrap the rules entirely, they replace them with something else. And this is the second key term you need to know from this document: self-certification.
I saw this, and I have to admit, it really made me pause. Self-certification. It sounds a little too good to be true.
It's exactly what it sounds like. Instead of waiting weeks or months for a city inspector to come out, check the foundation rebar, check the electrical wiring, check the roof framing, the builder simply signs a generic affidavit. They submit it to a federal designee, and they certify, yes, I met all the health and safety standards.
It's basically, trust me, I built it right.
Essentially, yes. It shifts the entire burden from government verification to private affirmation. The responsibility is now on the contractor, not the city inspector.
Okay, let's play this out. Let's look at the help versus the hurt here. I want to be the advocate for the family that's been living in a Motel 6 for the last 12 months.
A very real scenario for thousands of people.
Right. My savings are gone. I'm bleeding money. My kids are miserable. They're in a new school district. To me, this self-certification and preemption, this sounds like a miracle.
Oh, absolutely. And you cannot understate that. The help argument is all about velocity. It cuts the Gordian knot of bureaucracy. You bypass a system that, let's be honest, is notoriously slow and difficult in California. You get shovels in the ground tomorrow. You get people back in their living rooms by Christmas. That is a tangible, emotional, life-changing win.
But the hurt feels just as big.
The hurt is all about risk. Why do those complicated, slow, annoying building codes exist in the first place? They exist because California has earthquakes. It has wildfires. It has mudslides. Those strict codes are written in the blood and ash of previous disasters.
They're lessons learned the hard way.
Exactly. And if you now rely on a builder who is, economically incentivized to build as fast and as cheaply as possible to police themselves, you are rolling the dice with physics.
So let's imagine this. 5 years from now, the big one finally hits. The house that was self-certified collapses because the shear wall wasn't nailed off correctly, or the foundation anchors were subpar. Who is liable? The builder who signed the paper, the federal government who told them to skip the inspection, the homeowner.
That is a legal and moral nightmare waiting to happen. And that's the long-term risk. But beyond just the safety risk, there is the immediate constitutional precedent this sets. If the president can use an executive order to override local building codes because he's declared an economic emergency, what else can he override? Can a future president override local gun laws in Texas for a public safety emergency? Can they override school board curriculum decisions in Florida for an education emergency?
It opens a door, and once you establish that efficiency trumps jurisdiction, it's a very, very hard door to close.
And notice they aren't just using the law here. They're also using money as a weapon. Section 6 of this same order mandates a full audit of California's $3 billion in hazard mitigation grant program funds.
I saw that. The language there was aggressive, too. It wasn't just an audit. It was looking for funds awarded arbitrarily, capriciously, or contrary to law.
That is lawyer speak for, we are actively looking for a reason to take this money back. It's leverage. It is the administration saying very clearly to Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass, play ball with our new preemption rules, or we turn off the financial tap. It's a pincer movement.
So that's the battle over dirt and concrete in California. But this theme, this idea of removing red tape at all costs, it isn't limited to housing. It's happening to the environment on a much broader national scale. Which brings us to our second section.
Right. So we shift from a single EO to a press release from the Council on Environmental Quality, the CEQ. They've launched a new digital platform they're calling CE Works.
Which, it sounds pretty harmless. It sounds like a software update for your phone.
And in a way, it is. It's a tech platform. But to understand why this is a big deal, we have to talk for a second about NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act.
This is a cornerstone law.
It's often called the Magna Carta of environmental law. It's from 1970. And it's the law that says before the federal government builds a highway or approves a pipeline or permits a mine, they have to study how it will affect the environment, the birds, the water, the air, the local community.
And those reviews are famous for taking a long, long time.
Correct. They can take years. They involve public comment. They are designed to be thorough, and by design, they are slow. However, there has always been a kind of carve-out, an escape hatch, called a categorical exclusion, or a CE.
A CE.
A CE, right.
Yep.
If a proposed project falls into a category that the agency has already determined in the past doesn't have a significant environmental impact, think like repaving an existing road or replacing a telephone pole that's already there, it gets a CE. It gets to skip the deep multi-year review. It gets a fast pass at the theme park.
Okay, so this new platform, CE Works, what is it? Is it basically an automated fast pass dispenser?
That is the perfect analogy. It is a digital wizard, a streamlined online portal designed to help agencies and companies identify and grant these exclusions as rapidly as possible. The White House press release says this will cut through red tape and expedite timelines for crucial energy and infrastructure projects.
So we're talking about things like drilling rigs, pipelines, road expansions, maybe even new transmission lines for the grid.
All of the above. The stated intent is purely economic velocity. They want to lower the cost of producing energy and building infrastructure, and they see the NEPA process as the main bottleneck.
But the risk here seems pretty obvious. If you automate the process for getting an environmental waiver,
you risk rubber stamping. An algorithm or a simplified checklist might not be able to catch the nuance. It might not catch that this specific road repaving project goes through a critical wetland that wasn't there 10 years ago, or that this specific drilling site is now adjacent to a newly built school.
It loses the human element, the local knowledge.
Precisely. By making it easier and faster to get the exclusion, you inevitably, by definition, let more potentially risky projects slip through the net. It's the exact same pattern we saw with the LA housing EO.
Speed is the priority.
Yeah.
Safety, scrutiny, local context, those are all viewed as friction that needs to be removed from the system.
Exactly. And speaking of friction, let's talk about what is, for most people, the biggest source of friction in their lives: their taxes.
Section 3, the wallet impact. This is the part of this massive stack of paper that hits the listener's bank account directly and immediately.
And it starts with a big one, a press release for something called the Working Families Tax Cuts Act. The White House is calling this the largest tax refund season in American history.
And everyone likes a big refund check. The numbers they're touting here are significant. They estimate the average federal tax refund is going to jump from around $3,000 to nearly $3,800. That's an $800 bonus just for filing your paperwork.
And we need to look really closely at how they're achieving this. It's not just a simple rate cut for the upcoming year. The key mechanism is retroactive application.
Which means they changed the tax rules for the year that just finished, after it was already over.
Yes. Normally, tax laws apply to the next year, so people can plan. But they took these major new provisions, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security benefits, and applied them to the entire previous tax year.
So let's walk through that. If I'm a bartender and I've been having taxes withheld from my tips on every paycheck for the last 12 months.
Right.
The government is now saying, oops, our bad, we shouldn't have taken that. Here's all of that money back in one big check.
That is exactly what it is. It creates a massive and very noticeable lump sum payout that arrives right now during filing season.
Let's analyze who this helps, specifically. No tax on tips. That's your waitstaff, your bartenders, your Uber drivers, your hairstylists, gig economy workers. No tax on overtime. That's nurses, factory workers, police officers, firefighters, construction crews.
It is a very, very targeted populist economic strategy.
Yeah.
It almost completely bypasses the salaried laptop class, the lawyers, the consultants, the managers, and goes straight to the hourly worker in the service industry. It's frankly brilliant politics because the benefit is so tangible and immediate, you can't argue with an extra $800 in your bank account.
And throwing in the Social Security tax cut for seniors.
Well, that helps solidify a massive and reliable voting bloc. But, and there is always a but in economics, we have to look at the other document in this section because they don't arrive in a vacuum. It's a report from the Council of Economic Advisors titled The Economic Impact of State Income Tax Elimination.
I read this one. It's a sales pitch. They are holding up states like Texas, Florida, and Tennessee as the gold standard because they have zero state income tax. And they are very aggressively pushing every other state to follow that model.
A very strong push. But the report has to admit a basic mathematical reality. States need money. They have to pave roads, fund state troopers, pay teachers, run state parks. If you kill the income tax, which is a huge source of revenue, you have to replace it with something.
And their preferred solution is to broaden the sales tax.
Right. They don't give an exact number for every state, but they suggest a general sales tax rate of roughly 6 to 8% applied to a much broader base of goods and services than is currently taxed.
Okay, so walk me through the deceptive mechanics here. Because on the surface, no income tax sounds great. Everyone wants that. But if I'm suddenly paying 8% on, everything I buy.
Here is the fundamental difference, and it's what makes this so tricky. Income tax, for the most part, is progressive. The more you make, the higher percentage of your income you pay in tax. Sales tax is the opposite. It's regressive.
Explain what that means in practice.
Sure. Let's say you're a family that makes $30,000 a year. You spend almost every single dime of that on survival groceries, gas, car repairs, clothes for the kids, diapers. So effectively, your entire $30,000 income is being taxed at that new 8% sales tax rate.
But if I'm a different person and I make $3 million a year?
You're not buying $3 million worth of eggs and gasoline. You can't. You spend some of it, but you save and invest the vast majority of it.
Right.
So a huge chunk of your income is never, ever touched by that sales tax. It's sheltered.
So getting rid of state income tax is a massive, massive pay raise for the wealthy.
It's the biggest benefit for the highest earners, yes. And replacing it with a broad-based sales tax effectively shifts that tax burden downward onto the working class and the poor. So the trade-off the White House is offering is actually incredibly complex.
It's a shell game.
It's a shell game. You have to watch both hands. The federal hand gives you a big tax refund on your tips today. But the state hand, if your state listens to this advice from the White House, might take all of that back and more at the grocery store checkout line tomorrow.
It's a classic case of reading the fine print.
And while we're on the topic of money, we have to look at the entity that controls the cost of money itself, the Federal Reserve. We have a new nominee for chair to replace Jerome Powell, Kevin Warsh.
A name that's very familiar to people who follow finance. He's backed by Jamie Dimon at J.P. Morgan. He's broadly supported by Wall Street. And he's backed by politicians who have been screaming for interest rate cuts.
Senator Tuberville was quoted directly in the nomination announcement saying, "Time to cut rates." That is the clear mandate. This administration views the current higher interest rates as a brake on the economy, and they want to cut the brake lines to accelerate growth.
But isn't the whole point of the Fed that it's supposed to be independent from political pressure like that?
It's supposed to be. But this nomination signals a very clear shift toward a more, let's say, compliant Fed. The risk here, the big flashing red light, is inflation. The reason the Fed keeps rates high is to cool down the economy and stop prices from rising. If you install a card or two at share, specifically to cut rates and juice the stock market.
The stock market goes up, which helps everyone with a 401k or a pension.
It does. But the price of bread and milk and gas might go up too, because flooding the economy with cheap money fuels inflation. It's the classic tension in monetary policy. Do you want asset inflation, which is good for investors, or do you want price stability, which is good for everyday consumers? This administration is making a very clear bet on growth above all else.
Let's pivot from the wallet to the classroom. Section 4, Social Engineering and Education. There's a proclamation here on National School Choice Week that has some hidden teeth.
It really does. It's not just a feel-good statement. It references a specific piece of legislation that the White House is pushing called the One Big Beautiful Bill.
You have to appreciate the branding, if nothing else.
It is certainly memorable, but the mechanics within that bill are what's really significant. It creates something they're calling Trump accounts.
These are basically 529 accounts, right? The college savings plans.
Yes, but with a major twist. Usually 529s are exclusively for higher education, for college. This bill would create one for every single American newborn, and the tax-advantaged funds could be used for K through 12 education as well.
So I can take that money and use it to send my first grader to a private religious academy or a charter school.
Correct. And it's paired with another mechanism called tax credit scholarships. Basically, any individual or corporation can donate to a scholarship-granting organization and write it off their taxes, in some cases dollar for dollar.
Okay, let's do the intent versus effect here. The stated intent is money follows the student. Give parents options, break the monopoly of public schools.
And the effect is a massive federal subsidization of private and charter education. If you are a wealthy family or even a middle-class family who is already planning to send your kid to private school, this is a gift. It's a huge tax levy for doing what you were already going to do.
And what's the effect on the 90% of kids who are in traditional public schools?
Well, that's what the document calls the institutional threat. The proclamation isn't shy about it. It explicitly mentions ordering the Secretary of Education to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education.
It says that right in the text of the proclamation. Closure.
Explicitly facilitate the closure. The end goal is to dismantle the entire federal oversight structure for education in the United States.
So if you are a regular family with a kid in a public school, maybe a kid with special needs, who relies on IDA funding and the federal protections that come with it,
you are potentially losing that entire safety net. As federal resources, and just as importantly, federal focus, divert to these Trump accounts and private scholarships, the traditional public system faces a massive resource drain. It's a fundamental reshaping of American education, moving away from a public good model to a market commodity model.
And this theme of privatization, of shifting responsibility from the public to the private or nonprofit sector, it carries over to the other big social issue in these documents: addiction. We have the Great American Recovery Initiative.
This is a new executive order. And again, you have to look at the structure. It creates a new council co-chaired by the Secretary of Health and Human Services and a senior advisor from the White House. And the text of the order heavily emphasizes faith communities and the private sector as the primary agents of recovery.
The idea of faith-based recovery.
Right. The shift here is a move away from a purely medical or harm reduction model, things like methadone clinics, Suboxone access, needle exchanges, toward a model that is rooted in faith and business-led initiatives.
Now look, for some people, faith is absolutely the key to their sobriety. I don't think anyone would doubt that can be effective.
Absolutely not.
Yeah?
It can be life-saving. But for the government to officially prioritize that model in its funding and structure, it likely means a significant shift in federal grant money. Less money for the secular medical clinic downtown, more money for the religious nonprofit or the church-run program.
So if you are someone who isn't religious or whose addiction requires specific medical intervention that a faith-based program might not offer, your options for federally supported treatment might just shrink.
That's the potential impact. It's a subtle but profound change in how the state views a social problem. It's a move away from seeing it as a medical issue to be treated and more towards seeing it as a moral or spiritual issue to be redeemed.
Redeemed. That's a good way to put it. It's a moralization of policy.
It is.
Okay, so we've covered the soft power schools, taxes, housing permits. Let's talk hard power. Section 5. We have a press release from the appointed border czar, Tom Homan, who is on the ground, leading operations in Minnesota.
This is a fascinating document because it highlights a direct, real-time conflict between federal will and state resistance. Homan is in Minnesota, essentially going toe-to-toe with Governor Tim Walz and some local sheriffs.
The press release frames the operation as a huge success. He says they are targeting the worst of the worst: killers, rapists, transnational gang members.
And of course, no one argues with removing violent criminals from the country. That's a point of universal agreement. But we have to look very closely at the deceptive wording in the press release. Homan says the prioritization is public safety threats. Standard stuff. But then he adds a crucial and very intentional qualifier. He says, quote, "If you're in the country illegally, you're never off the table."
Never off the table.
That is the key phrase. That is the policy. While the headline and the sound bites are all about killers, the actual policy explicitly keeps the door wide open for deporting the nonviolent. The guy washing dishes in a restaurant for 10 years. The grandmother who overstayed a visa 20 years ago to be with her family.
So the stated help is public safety, getting the bad guys out. But the unspoken hurt is the pervasive fear that this creates.
It's the chilling effect. If you are an immigrant community, legal or not, you can't distinguish between a highly targeted raid for a known criminal and a general sweep. So what happens? People stop reporting crimes they witness. They stop going to the hospital when they're sick. They pull their kids out of school. They go underground. It makes the entire community less safe.
And Homan's language toward the local sheriffs who are uncooperative.
It is deeply combative. He says he's not a fool and that he won't walk away from Minnesota without results. It is a direct challenge to so-called sanctuary policies. He is asserting, in no uncertain terms, that federal immigration authority overrides any local non-cooperation policies. It's preemption again, but with badges and guns.
And then there's the international threat. We have an executive order declaring a full-blown national emergency regarding the nation of Cuba.
This is a heavy hitter. The justification laid out in the EO is that Cuba is hosting Chinese and Russian spy bases and is actively harboring terrorists from Hamas and Hezbollah.
That sounds like rhetoric straight out of 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis.
The White House is framing the threat as imminent and existential. And the response they've chosen is extremely aggressive. They're implementing what are called secondary sanctions.
Okay, explain that. Because we already sanctioned Cuba. The U.S. has had an embargo for decades.
We do. But normally, sanctions mean we, the United States, don't trade with them. Secondary sanctions are a tool to punish other people for trading with them. This order imposes tariffs on any country that sells oil to Cuba.
Whoa, so let me get this straight. If Mexico or Venezuela sends a tanker of crude oil to Havana,
we, the United States, will slap a new tariff on Mexican-made cars or Venezuelan goods coming into the U.S. It is, for all intents and purposes, a third-party blockade on energy.
The intent is clearly to collapse the Cuban regime, to bring it to its knees.
Yes. The theory is if you starve them of energy, the lights go out, the economy grinds to a halt, the government falls. But the immediate effect, it's severe humanitarian distress. If there is no oil, there is no electricity for hospitals, there's no fuel for tractors to harvest food or for trucks to distribute it. The Cuban populace, the very people we say we want to liberate, will suffer the most immediate and brutal consequences.
And there's a constitutional note here, too, isn't there? The power to levy tariffs is supposed to be Congress's job.
It is, explicitly. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution gives Congress the power to regulate commerce and set tariffs. But by declaring a national emergency under a law called IEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the president can bypass Congress completely. He is using emergency powers to unilaterally conduct a trade war.
Which brings us, I think, to our final section. We've had the heavy policy, the taxes, the arrests, the international crises. Now let's look at the show, Section 6. Symbolism and spectacle.
And you cannot ignore the biggest piece of spectacle in this entire stack of paper, the Freedom 250 Grand Prix.
An IndyCar race in Washington, D.C., through the streets.
It is wildly ambitious. The executive order actually outlines a proposed track layout. It would go around the National Mall, past the monuments. The order preempts local D.C. noise regulations. It preempts FAA drone restrictions. It orders federal agencies to cooperate.
The official theme is the year of celebration and rededication, tying into the America 250 anniversary.
This is political theater at its absolute finest. It's bread and circuses on a national scale. A massive, loud, fast, unapologetic spectacle designed to project an image of American greatness and dynamism.
The help is obvious. It's tourism dollars for D.C., it's entertainment, and honestly, it sounds like a pretty fun weekend.
It does. I'm not going to lie, I'd probably watch it. But the hurt, or at least the friction, is the complete disruption of the seat of government. You are turning the nation's capital city into a racetrack. It completely overrides the needs of the residents and the federal workers for the sake of a federally mandated party. It fits the theme we've seen all hour. Federal desires trump local concerns, period.
And speaking of themes in history, there is one last, very strange document, a White House message celebrating the birthday of William McKinley.
This is a very specific, almost nerdy historical signal. The White House put out a formal statement honoring President William McKinley on his birthday.
Why McKinley? He's not usually on the Mount Rushmore short list of presidents people talk about.
He's not. But McKinley was the tariff president. He built his entire political career in the late 1800s on a platform of economic protectionism, using high tariffs to protect American industry from foreign competition. By singling him out for praise, the administration is using history to justify their current economic policy. They are explicitly saying, we are returning to the economic nationalism of the Gilded Age.
And in the same week, they issued a proclamation officially restoring the name of Mount McKinley in Alaska.
Yes, and removing the name Denali, which was restored during the Obama administration.
So that's not just about a mountain. That's a direct reversal of a previous administration's policy.
It's a culture war signal. It's a statement. It says, we are taking the country back to an older, more traditional version of itself. It connects all the dots for their supporters. Tariffs, protectionism, old-school American greatness, and reversing the policies of their predecessors. It's all part of the same symbolic package.
So let's try to synthesize this. We've been through a mountain of paper. We've seen the housing permits, the tax cuts, the school vouchers, the border raids, the race cars, the history lessons. When you step back and look at it all together, what's the picture that emerges?
The picture is one of velocity and consolidated power. The single unifying pattern we see across every single one of these documents is the systematic removal of barriers.
Barriers like state laws, environmental reviews, local building codes, even the existing tax code.
Exactly. This administration views all of those checks and balances not as safeguards, but as obstacles, as friction in the machine. And so they are using the tools of emergency powers and preemption to clear the board, to create a direct line from the president's pen to action on the ground.
So let's go back to our original question. Who wins in this scenario? Who is helped?
If you value speed above all else, you win. If you're a builder in California who wants to get a house up tomorrow, you win. If you're a Wall Street investor who wants the Fed to cut rates and boost the market, you win. If you're a parent who wants to use public funds to send your child to private school, this week was a massive victory.
And who loses? Who is hurt by this velocity?
I think it's those who rely on the stability and the protections of the public sector, the public school system itself, the local environmental ecosystems that were protected by NEPA, the long-term structural safety of homes that were once guaranteed by inspections, and of course the undocumented population that is now living under the policy that they are never off the table.
It really is a trade-off then. It feels like we are trading checks and balances for efficiency. We're trading local control for what is seen as decisive federal action.
And that raises the final, really provocative question, I think. In a world where the government can suspend local rules to build houses or to race cars, or declare a national emergency to enact tariffs without a vote from Congress.
Where does the temporary fix end?
And where does the permanent change begin? If you get used to a president who can override your city council to get something done faster, do you ever get that local power back? Or have we fundamentally and permanently changed the architecture of the republic?
That's the question we'll leave you with today. Next time you see a headline about a simple, fast solution coming out of Washington, maybe take a minute to look for the fine print, because as we've seen today, the devil in the power is always in the details. Thanks for listening.
Stay curious.